Welcome to Access Your Leadership, where we share inspiring career stories and talk about ways you can level up your own leadership potential. I'm your host and coach, Hakeem Lakhdar, and today I'm here with my friend, Kathleen E.R. Murphy. Kathy is a CEO and executive sports coach at her company, Market Me Too, out of Boston, Massachusetts. Kathy, it is so great to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate being here. It's quite an honor and something I was looking forward to.
The honor is all mine. And you had me on your podcast, so to have you now back on mine is fantastic. I'd love to just dive in with a leadership win. What's a leadership win that you think of self or of others that you're willing to share?
Absolutely. It was funny. I was thinking about this yesterday and then this morning, and I realized with the notes that I had taken yesterday, I didn't take into consideration the fact that I wanted to highlight both the fact that I work with business and sports teams. So if I may indulge in two actual wins that I'm quite proud of. The first one is someone that's in a sports administrator at the Division I level in college who came to me for leadership coaching. And they were looking to accomplish a number of different things. The first thing that they really wanted to accomplish was to increase their title. They wanted to rise their title up from where it was. And then secondarily, they wanted to also experience an increase in pay. Now we know that maybe the title increase is a little bit easier to achieve than, say, perhaps the monetary increase, but I recently, I coached this person last year, and I found out that within the last 4 months, this person received not only, and they just come back from maternity leave, and they received not only an increase in their title significantly, and then they also broke the barrier that they've been trying to break monetarily, salary-wise, for years. And I was extraordinarily proud of them for doing that. But the thing that I was also super excited about was the fact that this person also told me that their trust level now in working with their colleagues and their boss that they report to, their level is way higher than they ever imagined that it could be, and that they are attributing to the work that I did with them to help them to increase their title, salary, and then the trust level. So that was a huge win for me on the sports side of my world, if you will. The other win for me was a business company that I've been working with for now 3 years. And I didn't learn this until probably about 3 months ago when they shared this with me, which I was thrilled to hear this information. And I found out that after coaching 21 of their leaders about a year ago, that their retention rate had never, ever been higher. And in fact, to be able to apply some numbers to that, which is pretty significant, they told me that they had saved $2 million. I'll repeat this, $2 million in recruitment fees that they ordinarily would be paying out in order to backfill because of retention levels, perhaps not being as good as they were. So that was an enormous kind of win for me. But one of the other things that came out of it that was something I was quite proud of was one of the leaders, the 21 leaders, and these are leaders from all around the globe, told me that my leadership program for him was life-changing. So, gosh, I don't think it can get much better than that. That wasn't necessarily an outcome that I could have predicted. I could hope for that, but those are two really important wins to me and that I was incredibly proud of.
Oh, those are great. Thank you for sharing those. I mean, life
Welcome.
changing to have somebody reflect on the work that you were able to do together and feel like not only did it impact them as a leader, but it actually changed their life in so many ways. That's why we do what we do, right?
Without a doubt. And the first person that I also referenced, I wanted to add that the other thing that they were significantly working on and towards was to increase their confidence level. And that was something that significantly improved as well. And that has been able to be maintained because of the training that I did with that individual. So that's something I was really proud of for them and thrilled that they were able to maintain that, because we know that confidence can wane, but you need to sometimes know the tricks in order to be able to maintain that and to kind of keep that pace. So that was significant too.
Well, and it's such a great example too. I mean, because I think, and I'm sure we'll get into this as we talk a little bit, but what you're describing there too is so common because people come in thinking that they want to address something in their coaching or in their self-improvement, self-development that's topical. I want a better title. I would like to make more money. And then actually what you really get into, which I heard was confidence and trust. And
Yes,
through building that confidence and establishing high levels of trust within the organization, guess what? You get seen as a leader that is commanding a higher salary, a better title. And naturally, those things occur because of the work that you're putting in below the surface, right?
exactly, exactly. And the other thing that they shared with me as well, that I was really thrilled for them, was the fact that more and more people were recognizing her because they were able to feel her counsel was so strong and it was progressively getting better. And so more and more people were going to her to get advice, which she was thrilled about. And so she felt incredibly satisfied that
Yeah.
that was a byproduct of the work that we had done as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Again, trust and confidence.
Yes,
And when people
right.
talk about, I mean, I have a lot of people come in and when they're talking to me about executive presence,
Yes,
what is executive presence and what is the impact of creating an executive presence that, like you said, allows for more trust and greater confidence and greater visibility and better relationship building. Well, all of those things then lead to the success that we all are striving towards, the results that we all want. But it's actually, how am I showing up? What encompasses me as a leader that then can be parlayed into salaries, titles, more responsibilities, greater job satisfaction, all of that. Love it.
without a doubt, without a doubt. And leadership presence is something that I think the words that the French have, the je ne sais quoi, you
Mm,
know it when you see it, you can't quite describe it, but you know
yeah.
when you're in the presence of it, is something that I think most leaders are striving to have.
Mm,
Not all of them obtain it. It's one of those things that it takes some work, and some people just naturally have it more than others. But I think it's definitely something that can be attained
yeah.
if that's perhaps somebody's goal.
Yeah. That's how I settled on my three C's because I was thinking,
Ah,
executive presence comes up a lot, leadership presence comes up a lot. So clarity, confidence, and compassion are my three C's. And when a leader shows up with clarity, which then creates confidence and does that in a compassionate way, compassion for themselves, but also
yes,
compassion for others, that's a leader people want to follow. That's a leader that people want to connect with and trust and elevate.
without a doubt. I was talking to one of my younger clients yesterday, and this is somebody who's in their 20s. So it's really fascinating to have a conversation with them in terms of some of their thinking as it relates to generalizations that they were talking to me about in terms of what motivates people, and someday looking ahead in terms of how he might go about leading others. And it was, I wouldn't say a contentious conversation, but it was a very spirited conversation because there were a lot of aha moments for this young
Mm,
person because they made an assumption that the way that they thought everyone wanted to be motivated the same way that he was, and that his how his parents motivated. And I shared with him that that wasn't necessarily the case, and it was kind of a big aha moment for him. But I was really happy that he was having it because I thought, well, this is going to serve you well because of the fact that you're going to now know going forward you can't just treat everybody exactly the same. It's not going to be probably in your best interest to do that.
yeah. I love that because that's also the reason why I've swapped I treat people the way I want to be treated with I treat people the way they want to be treated.
Mm.
Because realistically, if I'm going around treating everybody the way I want to be treated, that may not be their MO. That may not be their preference. And I always,
Sure.
the example that you use in motivation, it can be applied easily to feedback. And I have this conversation constantly. Well, I gave someone feedback the way I like to receive feedback. I said, but that person's not you. So the way
No,
that person
right?
received the feedback and their response to it is because they have a different way and preference of receiving feedback. How would they like to receive feedback? And I think that
Exactly.
understanding of people as different than ourselves and it not being right or wrong is a big piece of leadership. I love that you touched on that.
It really is. And one of the things, one of the questions that I always look forward to asking my clients, there are two questions actually. How would you describe yourself in 3 words or 3 sentences? And sometimes people are baffled by that. It's really hard for them to go about answering that question. You would think, my gosh, this is going to be a layup for them, so easy. And so if I see that maybe they're struggling with that, I'll say, well, let's look at it a different way. How would people that you know or others describe you? And that's much easier for them. They'll say, oh, well, they'll describe me as being confident or funny or whatever the, adjectives are that they're using to describe themselves. And it's interesting how that just slight shift in the perception for them to be aware of how maybe others are perceiving them is much easier for them to be able to articulate versus me asking, well, how do you see yourself? I just, that's always fascinating to me in terms of
Yeah.
how someone approaches those questions and answers them.
Well, and they're great questions because they almost allow you to take a temperature check on someone's self-awareness
Yes.
too,
Oh,
you know?
it completely does.
Yeah.
And independent of what decade they're living in,
Yep.
it really doesn't matter. You would think, okay, well, if somebody's in their 30s and 40s, they probably know themselves really well, maybe even 50s. Of course they do. No, that's not the case at all. We know
No,
that, right?
that's
Which
right.
is why we're doing the work that we do with people, because you can't make that assumption that they've figured that all out based on
Yeah.
the decade that they're in. That's an assumption that oftentimes it's a 50-50 chance that you're going to get it right.
Yeah, it's true. I
You
talk
know?
about sometimes these three me's, which I love as a concept where it's sort of this idea of like how I see myself,
Yes.
how I think other people see me,
Ah,
and then how other people really see me. And finding
yes.
some alignment with those, the closer that those are all together, it allows for us then to show up in the world from a place of comfort and confidence and self-knowing because they're not, vastly different. And if they are
No,
vastly different, then there's something to explore there. There's something to figure out and to talk through. And I think
exactly.
asking
There's a
that question,
disconnect.
that's right, absolutely right. The other thing I wanted to mention too, because the
Yes.
other win I don't want to minimize by any means. The $2 million in savings, I want to make sure that that is heard loud and clear by anyone who's listening, because I think it is understood broadly that hiring and recruitment can be quite expensive. But when you
Very.
think about how beneficial retention is, you realize that you're saving your organization an insane amount of money, oftentimes, by creating a culture that supports and develops and grows and retains
Without a
talent.
doubt. And thank you for underscoring that. And they did the math on this. They
Yeah.
broke it down and showed me the math. This just wasn't an arbitrary number that they came up with. They said, we wanted to see actually what the return on investment was based on the work that we had done. And it was incredibly significant. The other thing that was interesting about what that particular company did was they fully adopted the Gallup Strengths foundation for the rest of their company. So I like to say that they picked up a new language. So they speak Gallup Strengths now, which
Mm,
is so fun when I'm working with them now because everyone is speaking this new language that people can appreciate and benefit from enormously. So it's makes it even more fun. Just
yeah.
the more and more people within the organization that they're being touched by this new language.
Yeah. And
It's
you
important.
incorporate that quite regularly into your programming. Yes.
I do,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Right. I can get into talking about that a little bit
Beautiful.
just in terms of
Let's get into the fun part, which is your journey. And I'd love to hear from you where you began and what twists and turns and fun, exciting, unexpected challenges arose along the way that's now gotten you to where you are.
absolutely. So if you were to have asked me 30 years ago, did I ever expect to be having this conversation with somebody right now? I would have thought, no, absolutely not. I didn't even know about this as really an option, truthfully, probably until about maybe 10 years ago. So I went to college, got a degree in journalism, embarked upon being in the tech space as a executive marketing person, working for really fast moving, high performing companies that were all basically stood up to be sold. That was the intent for all of the companies that I worked at. So with one exception, that being Hitachi, all of the companies I worked for were sold. And my job was to ensure that the companies grew fast enough and their sales were high enough to be able to be attractive to another company. So the benefit to that, which I didn't realize at the time, was that every few years, when the company would get purchased, I would move on to another company. So I'd have to stand up another marketing team. I'd have to either recruit from scratch, or I would adopt a team and have to figure out how to make that team work and perform and do it again. So after doing that for a number of decades, I thought, well, this is fun. I'm really good at this, but what are aspects of this that I really like that potentially I could take away from this and maybe go do something else and have a different pace and have a different focus on what it is that I'm good at doing. So 10 years ago, I was at a tech company that introduced me to Gallup Strengths. And for me, that was a pivotal moment in my career and lifetime to say, oh, this is what I've been looking for. This is exactly what I think is an opportunity to take my skill set in a different direction. So I investigated in terms of, okay, what does this mean? How do I make a company out of becoming, and is it possible to become a coach? Is that such a thing? So I started investigating that probably about 10 years ago. And it was 8 years ago that I made the decision that was a place where I wanted to pivot off from. So left the corporate world behind and started up my company focusing on working with businesses, mainly individuals, leaders, and their teams, because that was what I knew. So I focused on what I knew and I felt really comfortable doing that and had really some nice success in doing that, had a lot of wins. People were happy with the work that I was doing. And I became a Gallup Strength coach prior to that to support being able to have credibility in the marketplace, not to just like stand up programs on my own based on my own experience, which certainly has a lot of merit, but I wanted to also have some different credibility behind me. So became certified as a Gallup Strengths coach and went down to DC and did that. And then as I was embarking upon the coaching journey, I was encouraged to start also writing by some of my clients in terms of the experience that I had. So I started blogging, and one blog led to the next. And after about 100 blogs, one of my clients said, why don't you think about like turning some of these blogs into books? So now 3 books later, under the Wisdom Whisperer brand, I also thought that that would help to make me stand out from other coaches and differentiate my expertise and where I was coming from. So my areas of focus for my books cover a number of different topics. They cover things such as motivation, leadership, and team dynamics and confidence, just to name a few. And I have parlayed that content into the podcast TV show that I did where you were a guest on called Murph and E Unfiltered. But my book series is under the brand name of Wisdom Whisperer, because I basically saw myself as a virtual mentor for people that I wasn't coaching. If they wanted to buy my books, great, they could benefit from that in a different way. But so those are some of the things that I did to stand up my company. And I just penned my 425th article this past weekend. So I'm on my way to having 8 books worth of content. Now, 3 of them, as I said, are published, and you can buy them on Amazon if you'd like to, or come to my website and purchase them that way. But I continue to write to maintain my craft, not only as a writer, but also to be credible in the marketplace and to also test my ability so that I'm sharp. And when I'm working with, especially my business clients, I have even more to offer from the credibility of thinking things through and offering advice. So all of my blogs, and I think you've read maybe a couple of them, at the end of them, they have tips that are actionable. So I don't just pontificate on a particular topic. I actually provide, I'm hoping, value to people so that when they read what I'm talking about, there's a takeaway for them. Now, as I was going through this journey of working with my business clients, I realized, and I came across an opportunity to find out about a fellow coach who, her name is Maureen Monte, and she wrote a book called Destination Unstoppable. And I read the book and I was fascinated by it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this book is for me. Now, what she did was she took the Gallup concept and pointed it in the direction of focusing the concept for working with sports teams.
Mm.
Now, I was an athlete when I was growing up. I played soccer and lacrosse, loved sports, could have played in college, decided not to, but just have a passion for sports and all things sports. So I thought, wow, this would be kind of fun. How would I go about doing something like this in terms of having this be an aspect of my business? How would I just start out working with sports teams? Because I don't have any credibility in terms of doing that. So I embarked upon a journey to do a research project during COVID that allowed me to interview over 50 coaches from around the globe, two outside of the US. And I was asking coaches at the levels of high school, college, professional, and Olympic questions related to team dynamics and leadership, and why do you go out and recruit certain people over others, and all kinds of questions relating to those types of topics. And then I did the analysis on that information, and I did a second round of analysis on the information after the first round, because I realized that 25% of the coaches that I had interviewed just by chance, was very organically sort of put together as a project, had been championship coaches. So it took
Mm.
out the high school coaches because they don't compete at the national level, if you will. So it included college, professional, Olympic. So we're talking NBA, NFL, etc. Coaches, to see what the results were from the reportings from those particular coaches, to see if those responses were going to be different from the non-championship coaches. It turns out that they were, and pretty significant in terms of what is there a secret ingredient or recipe for being a championship coach? And the answer is yes, there is. So I know what that is, and I share that information with my clients. So after doing that research, I then went out to I've got my husband, I have 3 kids, and I went to our youngest son's high school lacrosse coach. He had just left the team, he had transferred to a different school. And I asked him if he would take me on so I could test out this concept of working with sports teams and using the Gallup concept there. Long story short, he said, yes, let's do it, Kathy. This sounds great. I've been looking for a different edge and different way to allow our team to be more competitive and to compete in a way that is going to give us an edge over everybody else. So it turned out that they had an incredible season. They achieved their goals and then went beyond them for that particular season. So that was how I embarked upon sort of pivoting at that point my client focus from being 100% business to that of being also oriented towards the sports teams world. So about a year ago, 50% of my business, it took me about 3 years to get there, but about 50% of my business is coming now from working with sports teams, which is wonderful. That was one of my personal goals, was to have a balance of both sports teams and work teams and the associated individuals to work with them. Because of the work that I've been doing at the sports teams level, and I predominantly working at the college level right now, I'm in talks with some professional teams at the moment. So we'll see where that's going to take me the next year or so. That'll be really kind of fun for me to embark upon that aspect of my journey, because that's another aspiration that I have to achieve. But the work that I'm doing with the sports teams has caught the attention of MSNBC, and they noticed what I was doing, and they asked me if I'd be interested in telling my story in terms of the journey that I've had with the research that I did and working with sports teams. And I told them that I'm flattered that you're asking me this, but I'm going to say no, because I would have to go back and ask for permission for all of the coaches. And it's something also that is proprietary to the work that I do.
Mm.
So I've kept that to myself. And I wanted to just really make that special for the clients that I'm working with. Now, having said that, I've also been asked to work with younger athletes, which wasn't something that I was intending on focusing on, but there was such a big demand for, and I'm talking high school, so 15 to 18-year-olds that were preparing to go and compete to try to obtain a scholarship at the college level is a whole different ball game, if you will. And so I was asked to start to think about putting programs together to support athletes who were considering that. So that's a new twist on the sports side of my business, which is really taking off. And I've been asked to go down to Fort Lauderdale in December to talk to a very, very large group of athletes that specifically are basketball players who are all going to be embarking upon that journey so that they can find out about the work that I do. So where I'm at now in terms of my business is, if when I look back, and I was talking to her earlier, right before we started, I was thinking, gosh, it would have been really nice to have had a blueprint for doing the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
That would have been really nice.
Yeah.
But there wasn't. So I sort of had to kind of figure this out along the way and to embark upon that entrepreneurial journey in a way that I thought made sense. And I don't know if this is going to show up, but so I'm a Gallup Strengths coach, and these are my top 5 strengths.
Love it.
And it's those strengths that allowed me to figure out, to come up with my own blueprint to support my business. But one of the things I was telling you earlier was the fact that I have actually talked so many people out of considering going into coaching. And the reason being is because it's not easy to do. It's incredibly rewarding, but it's difficult to do because there's so many things that initially, when you first are getting started, that you have to be good at. And I know, as especially a Gallup Strength coach, that not everybody has the strengths perhaps that are going to be required in order for you to be successful. And there's no guarantee, even with certain strengths, that you will be successful. So I ask people questions such as, well, how do you like making sales pitches or calls? And most people bristle at that. They're like, what? I said, well, how are you going to develop your business? What about marketing? Are you good at marketing? No, gosh, I'm terrible at marketing. They would say, like, okay, so 2 strikes so far. And then I ask a series of other questions. And by the time that we're done, most people that have thought about becoming a coach will stay where they are. Not a bad thing, because
No.
let's face it, yes, we need more coaches out there like you and I to help support people, but it's definitely much harder than it looks. And the other thing that I did last summer to expand upon my business and to give it another twist was I realized that my athletes would have moments when they'd almost be like a deer in the headlight, and they get stuck and frozen in terms of being able to perform. So I found out about the concept of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which Tony Robbins is really well known for. And I know that you're familiar with it as well. And I believe that you even practice some of that too. And it just lit me up. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is something I need to become certified in. So I did. And I went through that process and then started immediately applying it to my sports coaches, as well as their athletes as well, in particular. And then I realized, I think some of my business clients could benefit from this as well. So I would ask them, because I didn't want to make that assumption, because I just saw such a perfect alignment with NLP and athletes. And I've coached professional athletes and I've coached Olympic athletes. And so I know that this works with them as well. But I wasn't so sure in the business world, format wise, if it was going to work. And I can assure you, as you know, it does.
Yeah.
So that was a big twist in my business last year in terms of how I was progressing to continue to add value, which is something that as coaches, we're always looking to kind of push, I think, not only ourselves, because I think in order to be credible as a coach, I think, I know that you would agree upon this, but we have to walk the walk. We have to talk the talk. We can't just tell other people what to do and not practice it ourselves. So I am continuously pushing myself personally and professionally, development wise, and always looking for opportunities to take myself to the next level, to work on mindset or whatever it is that I need to work on to become a better coach for and better leader for others.
Well, that's clear too. I mean, I think even in the way you described your journey, you're a lifelong learner, and to have taken all of the experience that you gained in your corporate life as a professional, and then to leverage that as someone who's then working with people from a coaching perspective, it requires a deep understanding of self. And I want to let you finish the journey, as it were, but also just kind of want to take us back for a quick minute if you're open to it. What was that like? What was the decision in your mind, or what propelled you from corporate into coaching? You had a successful career. I mean, I tell the story all the time with myself. I could have easily stayed in what I was doing prior to launching my own practice, continue to climb that ladder, but I just felt called to do what I was doing in my traditional career for leaders in my own practice and do so in my own way. What was that moment like for you?
I think at one point I just felt like my purpose hadn't been discovered for myself. And so it was a journey when I learned what my own strengths were. I felt like I really wasn't putting them to full use in the corporate space. Independent of the fact that I had been successful doing that, I just felt like something was missing. And I said to my husband, who had been an entrepreneur, I said, this is a journey that I really feel strongly that I need to take in order to feel like I'm fulfilling a purpose that I haven't felt like I've closed the loop on this or discovered that I can be more impactful to a wider audience by way of shifting gears and going out on my own to impact other people. Because being able to speak publicly, being able to give workshops, we're in front of hundreds and, we've been in front of thousands of people. So I feel like that is more important to me in terms of being able to give to others what I wish I had known,
Mm,
and to help them progress that much faster in terms of helping them to get wherever it is that they want to get to, and whatever journey they happen to be on. Does
yeah.
that does
Yeah,
that help
absolutely.
kind of explain it a
It
little bit?
does. Well, and I
Okay.
love the fact that you mentioned purpose, because I think there's a lot of conflicting views around the value of purpose and what purpose is. And I know a lot of people, when they think about purpose, it creates this sort of panicked feeling in them that they're unclear of what my purpose is, or do I
Yes.
have a purpose? Do I need a purpose? Does a purpose
Yeah.
I have to quit my job and start basket weaving? And it's not
Right.
really about that. It's really about it's counterintuitive to a lot of us who are high achievers and ambitious, but it's a slowing down and actually just kind of listening to what's true for us. And
Without
I
a doubt.
often tell clients, look, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that was the conversation I had with myself. I could stay in this career and be wildly successful, but just because I figured out how to do this, and I was working with, as you know, working with lawyers for 20 years, just because I can, just because I figured out how to do this doesn't mean that I should, or that I really ultimately want to.
Right.
And that is where purpose starts to reveal itself. Ooh, here are my strengths. Here's what I love to do. Here's what lights me up. This feels like it would be best served doing X. And that may be working in an organization. That may be, working for somebody else, and that's okay. But I think that if
Yes.
you find that you're able to construct that for yourself, what a beautiful journey that starts, right?
Without a doubt. And I didn't have parents that were entrepreneurs. So I didn't have, as I mentioned earlier, a blueprint necessarily to draw from. I had seen my husband be an entrepreneur. So I had the good fortune of at least watching that and seeing how that unrolled over the course of a couple decades for him. And then I finally just said, all right, we need to switch places here. I'm gonna go be an entrepreneur. And so he decided to go back to work for somebody in the corporate space, which is a big shift for him. And I credit and thank him every day for allowing me to do that. And he just he supports the notion that he's just seen me kind of come into my own, and just to be so happy and so passionate about what I'm doing,
Mm,
that he just every day just tells me, keep going, keep going. Like, I love the fact that you're having an impact that you are on the world, if you will. And that
how
just,
refreshing.
yeah, it just makes me, it's such as I have to pinch myself to, realize that, gosh, I'm really making what was a dream of mine happen, and have that come to fruition.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it highlights the importance of who we choose to have around us, right?
Yes.
And we get to choose. I think there's a lot of our life partners, of course, but also our network and our support system. It came up for me as well. I mean, these were conversations that we had to have around having a young family and having relocated from Boston down to South Florida and building a life here, and then all of a sudden saying, okay, let's put the brakes on for a second. I'm going to jump into this entrepreneurial journey. What does that look like for us? What's the impact going to be? What's the value of this short term, long term? Yes, I would have loved a crystal ball. I would love a blueprint, but the reality is, as we learn, and this goes back to sort of this lifelong learning that you're committed to as well, as we learn about ourselves, as we learn about people, as we learn about the world, we see that we get to then choose from these variety of directions that we want to take ourselves and our businesses. So going back to the shift that you started to make away from purely or primarily these more like business focused corporate clients to the sports world, what were some of the parallels that you started to see as you were working with both of these different groups?
I realized that it's obvious, I think, but that independent of whether they were in one camp or the other, the business camp or the sports camp, they were people.
Mm,
And they had a common denominator of that being the case. And they had similar requirements, especially the leaders, in terms of helping them to understand how to be more impactful in the role that they were in. And that started with the self-awareness that many of them, perhaps if you were to have asked them to rate themselves in terms of what do you think your self-awareness level might be, when I first started with them, their answer was quite different than when we finished.
mm,
And I think that they were pretty surprised potentially by that in some ways. And I would say that people don't, they're not necessarily taught in terms of how to fully appreciate others and to be able to interact with them at a different level than most people are accustomed to interacting with them at. And what I mean by that is that I know that particularly when I'm working with the business and sports teams and they all find out as team members what one another's top 5 strengths are, it's really a game changer for all of them because of the fact that they start looking at one another very differently from a different lens. It's almost as if I've given them an MRI to be able to look at others much more deeply and to appreciate and to tap into seeing others not just at a face value, but to be able to appreciate and see these nuances and these different characteristics and abilities that that person maybe hasn't demonstrated to them before, and that they can now appreciate that they have these particular talents and strengths that, independent of not knowing that, they may not have interacted with them at at the level which they could to make their team stronger and their ability to get along better and to communicate at a higher level and ultimately to impact performance, whether you're on a
mhm.
business team or a sports team. So at the end of the day, both of these types of teams are focused on performance. That's always in the forefront of their mind. They've got numbers that they're trying to hit. And in the sports world, what's harder for them is that there's such a spotlight on people actually watching them do their job. The business people have the benefit of people not always seeing exactly what they're doing all the
Yeah.
time. They can kind of mask some of that. But so it's that much more difficult for the sports teams because they're always under a microscope. So anything that they can do to help them to benefit from being able to not only understand themselves better and understand their teammates better is going to significantly impact their outcome. And they need that every day. Now the
Yeah.
business people certainly benefit from that too, but there's not as much pressure in the business on the business team as there is on the sports team.
Yeah.
So those are some of the sort of comparisons that I would draw in terms of just what are the differences, what are the similarities, but critically, I would say also at the leadership level for both the sports and the business leaders, they have to know who they are.
Yeah.
And they can't be really an extraordinary, a confident and effective leader without, at the base level of the foundation, having that self-awareness be at the highest level then they can attain.
Yeah. You nailed it. That is, I mean, that's the mic drop moment, really. I mean, I would do a training with a company out of the UK, and we do this 8-week training. It's twice a week, 2 hours each session. So, it's a pretty involved, high
Yes.
commitment. You can imagine, just from 8 weeks of training and spending that amount of time together, we're spending it all on what you just talked about. And what we say before we get into any of that is that this is not a replacement for results. This is not in spite of results. This is actually in service of results, of higher efficiency, higher performance. But in order to even come close to accomplishing those goals and that level of success, each individual on the team needs to know themselves.
Yes.
And then they need to know each other in a way where there's not judgment, there's not assumptions, there's not storytelling around what that means, there's no labeling. But actually, it's this. I mean, we have an image that we show all the time in these trainings where it's the 3 planks of wood, and depending on how you look at it, can look like 3 or can look like 4. And the
Uh,
takeaway was, just because you're right doesn't mean they're wrong. And I
uh,
was having this conversation with someone just yesterday about diversity, sort of diversity, small d, but diversity is, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, yes. And it's also a diversity of ideas and backgrounds and experiences, and understanding where people are coming from and what makes them unique, what makes you unique, and how you all come together then in service of a common goal. That's where results come from. People think it's, well, instead of working 40 hours, I'm going to work 60 hours. It's like, no, that's not going to get you there. It's
no,
really, it's really like you described, it's understanding who we are as individuals, certainly as leaders, if we're in a leadership position, and then how that relates to those around us.
and I think also what I'll add to that is when you have the heightened self-awareness that we work towards helping people to achieve, ultimately the one of the byproducts of that, which is so significant, is a word that most people will just embrace and thrive off of enormously, and that is that of appreciation, feeling appreciated.
Yeah,
That's critical to how people are going to succeed or fail. And it doesn't take a lot to invest in somebody to make them feel appreciated. But when you do, and that comes from being not only self-aware, but self-aware or having a heightened awareness of others,
mm,
that then that appreciation can start to, be manifested and come into play in appreciation. And that just,
100%.
it's a beautiful thing when that
It
happens, when
is.
you
It
see
is.
that to occur.
Yeah.
It
I,
bonds
I
people enormously.
It does. It really does. I use the word acknowledgement, but it's in the same vein. It's this idea of appreciation, but
Yes.
the way in which people can acknowledge or appreciate one another consciously, intentionally, powerfully, creates such trust, creates such comfort, creates such opportunity for collaboration. And then the effects of that are what everyone's ultimately looking to achieve, which is results and outcomes and success. But you're so right. I mean, I think it's that reinforcing of, I see you, I hear you, I value you. And going back to where you started, we are all just human beings.
Yes.
We all desire that at any level, at any point in our lives. We all want to be seen, heard, and valued. And I think that the self-awareness that you're referring to and the awareness of others and what they bring to the table allows for that to occur.
It doesn't, particularly because I specialize in leadership and also working with teams. Team dynamics is so critical, and that componentry of the appreciation that is wrapped into part of that, if you will, wrapper is critical to developing the team dynamics that people desire to achieve, which is
Yeah.
no small easy feat to accomplish.
Yeah,
And it's fluid. You have to, it's
it
not
is.
something that you can hit the button and set it and be all set. It doesn't
Right.
work that way. You have to
No,
continuously work on it.
it's certainly not a one size fits all approach either. I
No,
mean, I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, I mean, we're sort of half joking about the blueprint, but there is no blueprint
no.
really. And when leaders are thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to commit to, I did a presentation a while back where I went through 12 different leadership styles and I was describing them and explaining them. And I asked the question at the end, so, which one do you think is the best? And everyone was saying, well, this one's the best and that one's the best. And I said, well, spoiler alert, you're all wrong because none of them are the best. They all have to be available to you. They have to be in your toolkit. You have to be able to toggle as a leader between all of these at any point in time. And your style, your philosophy as a leader, sure, that can be something that's unique to you, but having access to how we relate to people is something that's ever changing. Uh,
It sure is.
yeah,
It
I
sure is.
appreciate that.
And we have to embrace that and be comfortable with it. And we ourselves are not the same person that we were perhaps 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. And that's probably a good thing.
Yeah,
I think, particularly if you're invested in constantly trying to develop yourself to another level. And not everybody takes that approach, but I embrace it, you embrace it, and I see the outcome that and results that you get from it. So when I see others being able to do the same, nothing makes me happier.
yeah. Well, thank you. And as I tell my clients, this is a mountain with no top, which
I
is
like that.
sometimes a little confronting and a little discouraging, but it's not meant to be, obviously. It really is the fact that what we're talking about here is work that is ongoing. This isn't
Yes.
once you reach a certain age, okay, cool. You sort of wash your hands of having to put this work in. It through the seasons of our lives is always changing, and we are always changing. And for us to just think, okay, I've done enough, or I've learned enough, or I know enough, that's quite short-sighted because the interactions and relationships and the experiences that we are constantly finding ourselves creating throughout our lives requires that we grow with it. And I
Yeah.
think that's a big takeaway for me today. Being mindful of time, I want to give you an opportunity to just sort of share, and with anyone who's listening, what's a leadership skill or attribute that you think those who are listening who are looking to level up their leadership might want to focus on?
So I've mentioned this a couple times, but it's definitely worth mentioning again, and that is self-awareness. And without self-awareness, it's going to be really difficult to progress, to get yourself to whatever that level it is and to achieve those goals that you really want to achieve if you don't have that as a foundation. So that is really fundamentally and foundationally what I'm focused on when I'm working with my clients, is having this understanding that that's where we start at with our foundation, and we build from there. We build
Yeah,
up from there. And that's critical. And it takes time to develop it. And it's like you said, there it's like a mountain without a mountaintop. It's like the weather, it's ever changing. And that's not a bad thing, because I think the more that you can become aware of yourself, the better, particularly as a leader, that you're going to serve others. You
yeah,
can't serve others well and at the level that you should or could be serving them until you get to that self-awareness level that is going to take some work to get to, but it's worth every moment of time that you put into it. I
yeah.
can assure you that, and you know that to be the case.
Yeah, no, and it's so true, Kathy, and this as a coach as well too, that we can only lead others to the extent to which we can lead ourselves, and that's
That's right.
why I think it's such an important piece, and I'll yes and that with the self-awareness is step one, and the self-awareness is never just enough. It's the self-leadership piece that we then take, okay, now that we know this about ourselves, what do we want to do differently?
Right.
What do we want to do with that knowledge? And I think that's the beauty of the work that we get to do with our clients is, okay, now that we've established a self-awareness, what do we want to do with that? Where do we want to go from here? And I think the self-awareness, again, and I heard it in your voice as you were sharing it, but I want to call it out specifically that it's light, it's free of judgment. It's just an awareness, it's just a noticing that has to occur. And as it does, then things start to open up and we can sort of go from there.
100%. I think I'll end by saying this. I believe it opens up more opportunities for you than you could ever imagine in your wildest dreams when you achieve self-awareness.
Yeah.
It's extraordinarily powerful.
No, I think you're living proof of that. I mean, even just your story alone, that I think was a crucial ingredient to your success.
Thank
And
you.
I appreciate you being here with me today. I want to give you a chance to just tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you, how they can find out more about the work you're doing. Maybe they can even find out some of these secrets that you have ascertained from your research and the work that you do.
Yes, absolutely. So my company is called Market Me Too, and it's marketme2too.net. And that's a great place to start to kind of take a look at some of the opportunities that I have for people to engage with me. And I'm happy to jump on a Zoom call with somebody to talk through what their requirements might be. Having been obviously a business focused person for many, many years, obtaining goals is really critical to me. So it's very clear when I'm working with people what the end game and end result is going to be. And I'm going to get you there. People can also take a look on YouTube and see some of the shows that I've got out there for them. If they're not readers, I say, they can listen to the podcast under Murph, M-U-R-F, and E, letter E, Unfiltered. Murph and E, Unfiltered is the podcast that people can take a look at to gain some additional knowledge for free. And I give people access to many of my blog articles as well on my website and different resources available to them so that they can tap into that and find a topic that resonates with them or that they want to know some more information about and take it away from there. So I'm looking forward to hearing from whoever might be listening to this. And I thank you again for asking me to be on your show here.
Oh,
This is your podcast. I love it. So happy to be here today.
thank
And again,
you. Thank
I'll
you.
say I'm
My
honored.
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And those are over nearly 500 blog posts, right?
I'm getting there, about 75 away.
Yeah. So that's a wealth of knowledge there that hopefully people can get access to when they check out the work you're doing. Again, thank you, Kathy, for the time today. I really appreciate all of our conversations, especially this one.
Yes, likewise. Thank you. This is a lot of fun. I appreciate your time.
You're most welcome. As always, I'd love to hear from you about the episode. What came up for you as you think about leveling up your leadership game? And please, if you enjoyed the episode, I encourage you to like and subscribe. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Hakeem A. Lockdar or at lockdarcoaching.com. Thanks for tuning in. Keep being great, and we'll see you next time.